They thought they were calling the cops on a suspicious black woman in her own yard. What they didn't know. She was the county sheriff, and she was about to turn the entire HOA upside down. The sun dipped low over Maplewood Estates, one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where the grass was trimmed sharp enough to measure with a ruler and where every porch light was identical, down to the wattage. The homeowners association liked it that way. Uniformity brings peace, their president often said at meetings. To most, that meant conformity. To Sheridan Walker, it meant surveillance disguised as neighborly concern. Sheridan had lived here barely 6 months, and in that time, she'd already counted 3 anonymous letters from the HOA stuffed in her mailbox. Too many cars in her driveway. Curtains that were non-regulation beige. Once, even a complaint about her music, played at 2 in the afternoon, at a perfectly reasonable volume. She knew what it really was, an excuse to remind her that some people thought she didn't belong here. On this particular evening, Sheridan sat on her front porch in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, sipping iced tea. Her German shepherd, Chief, lay at her feet, ears twitching lazily. The September air smelled of cut grass and barbecue charcoal. It was the first peace she'd had all week. Down the street, however, HOA President Clifford Myers leaned on his fence with a cell phone pressed to his ear. His face burned red, more from indignation than from the setting sun. "Yes, officer," he said, his voice dripping with importance. "Suspicious individual on Maplewood Drive. Dark-skinned woman. Loitering. She claims to live here, but she doesn't belong. Could be trespassing." Clifford's neighbor, Patricia, hovered nearby, nodding enthusiastically as if the officer could see her. "You'd better send someone right away," Clifford pressed. "This neighborhood pays for safety. We won't tolerate strangers hanging around." The dispatcher on the other end took notes. No one questioned Clifford. He was, after all, the HOA president, a man who relished the illusion of power. Within minutes, a unit was dispatched. Sheridan noticed the cruiser before she heard it. 2 sets of headlights turned the corner, rolling slow down Maplewood Drive. She raised an eyebrow, set her tea on the porch railing, and murmured to Chief, "Looks like we've got company." Chief thumped his tail once, uninterested. The car stopped in front of her driveway, tires crunching gravel. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, hands already adjusting their belts. Their eyes scanned her porch like they'd been briefed on a potential threat. Sheridan's stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the familiar sting of insult. She had trained half the department in de-escalation. These were her deputies, whether they realized it yet or not. "Evening, ma'am," the taller officer called out, keeping his voice firm. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Sheridan leaned back in her chair. "Sitting on my porch. Drinking tea. Pretty wild behavior, huh?" The shorter officer exchanged a look with his partner. "We got a call about a trespasser. Said you didn't live here." A soft laugh escaped Sheridan. "And who said that?" Before either officer could answer, Clifford strutted forward like a man about to claim victory in a courtroom. Patricia trailed behind, eager to spectate. "That's her," Clifford announced, pointing. "She's been out here all evening. She doesn't live here. She's scaring people. You need to take her in." The taller officer cleared his throat. "Sir, let us handle this." "I am handling it," Clifford barked. "I'm the HOA president. I know who belongs and who doesn't." "She doesn't." Sheridan's patience thinned, but she kept her voice calm, measured. "Officers, would you like to see my ID, or do you prefer the neighbor's gossip as evidence?" The shorter one stepped closer. "Ma'am, if you could stand up, we'll need to verify your information." Chief suddenly rose, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Sheridan placed a hand on his neck, steadying him with a whisper. Her eyes locked on the officer. "Careful," she said softly. "He doesn't like it when strangers raise their voices at me." The taller officer hesitated. Patricia gasped, clutching Clifford's arm as though Sheridan had unleashed a monster. She's threatening us now," Clifford shouted. "You see? This is exactly why she can't be here." Sheridan exhaled slowly, stood up, and reached into her pocket. Both officers stiffened, hands brushing their holsters. She noticed, but ignored it. With deliberate calm, she withdrew her leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it out. The golden badge gleamed in the porch light. The words engraved across it froze both men in place. County Sheriff. Sheridan's voice was quiet, but it carried. "I do live here. And you both just tried to detain your boss on her own property." A silence heavier than stone settled over the driveway. The taller officer's jaw worked soundlessly, while the shorter one blinked as though trying to wake from a bad dream. Patricia covered her mouth. Clifford's face drained of color, though his mouth opened and shut like a fish gasping for air. Sheridan slid her badge back into her pocket, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Now," she said, "why don't you both tell me exactly who made this call?" The two officers turned in unison toward Clifford. And for the first time all evening, the HOA president had no words. The two officers shifted uncomfortably in the glow of their cruiser's headlights, caught between training and humiliation. Sheridan could see it in their faces, the mental scramble to figure out how to backpedal without digging themselves deeper. The taller one cleared his throat. "Sheriff Walker, we didn't realize." Sheridan cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't. You got a call. You responded. But you didn't verify facts before stepping onto my property. That's problem number one." She let her words hang there. Her tone wasn't angry, it was controlled, deliberate, the same way she dismantled suspects in interrogation rooms. Clifford finally found his voice, shaky but defiant. This has to be some kind of mistake. You can't possibly." Sheridan turned slowly toward him, her gaze making him shrink half an inch. "You made the call?" Well, yes, but only because I was drinking iced tea on my porch?" Sheridan's voice carried, loud enough for the neighbors peeking from their blinds to hear. "Or because you didn't like the color of the person sitting here?" Patricia flinched, glancing around nervously as more porch lights flicked on down the street. Sheridan didn't need to look, she could feel the neighborhood watching, the gossip engine firing on all cylinders. Clifford stammered, his composure slipping. It's about safety. We have standards." "Strangers." "I am the standard," Sheridan said sharply, stepping closer. "This county signs my paycheck to keep you safe. And tonight, you wasted police resources because you couldn't mind your own business." The officers shifted again. Sheridan caught the younger one trying to suppress a wince. "Sheriff," he began carefully, "we should probably log this as a false report." Clifford's head whipped toward him. "False report? Are you calling me a liar? I run this community." Sheridan's lips curled in a humorless smile. "You run nothing. HOA bylaws don't override county law. And right now, you're walking a thin line between harassment and criminal misuse of emergency services." Patricia tugged at Clifford's sleeve, whispering frantically, but Clifford yanked free. "No! This is absurd. She doesn't belong here, none of this is right." Sheridan tilted her head. "You want to test me, Clifford? I've got all night. My badge isn't just for show." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Chief, her shepherd, gave another low growl as if punctuating the warning. Finally, the taller officer broke the silence. "Sheriff, with your permission, we'll clear the scene. And file the paperwork accordingly." Sheridan gave a curt nod. "Do that. And add my note to the record, this is not the first baseless complaint this HOA has made. I'll be reviewing the logs personally." The officers exchanged quick glances. They knew what that meant. No one in the department wanted the sheriff herself combing through their calls, it was accountability on steroids. They retreated to the cruiser, relief obvious in their quickened steps. The engine rumbled back to life, headlights sweeping across the cul-de-sac as they pulled away. That left Sheridan, Clifford, and Patricia standing in the awkward hush of the street. Clifford tried again, his voice smaller now. Listen. I think we're all overreacting. Let's just put this behind us. Sheridan stepped down from her porch, closing the distance until they were eye to eye. Clifford's bravado cracked completely under the weight of her stare. You called the police on me because you thought I didn't belong in my own neighborhood, she said evenly. That's not something I forget. And it's not something the law ignores. Clifford's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Patricia tugged at his arm again, finally dragging him backward toward their driveway. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting, Patricia muttered, trying to salvage dignity. Sheridan watched them retreat. She didn't move until their front door slammed shut. Only then did she exhale, stroking Chief's head. Good boy, she murmured. Looks like this block party's just getting started. She turned back toward her porch, but her mind was already spinning. This wasn't just an isolated incident. Clifford had been testing her since she moved in. Tonight, he'd gone too far, and now she had leverage. If the HOA thought she was just another homeowner they could bully, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. Sheridan sipped the last of her melted iced tea, set the glass down, and made a silent promise. Next time, she wouldn't just be reacting. Next time, she'd be leading the charge. Morning sunlight spilled across Maplewood Estates, turning every manicured lawn into a postcard. But Sheridan Walker wasn't admiring the scenery. She was at her kitchen counter, black coffee steaming in her mug, laptop open, and her county email inbox flashing with alerts. She had spent half the night replaying the scene in her mind, the cruiser headlights, Clifford's smug finger pointing, the disbelief when her badge came out. It wasn't the first time she faced ignorance, but it was the first time it had followed her all the way home. And she wasn't about to let it slide. With a few keystrokes, she pulled up dispatch logs for Maplewood Estates from the past 6 months. As sheriff, she had clearance to everything. The list was longer than expected, 15 separate calls, all from the same neighborhood, all made by HOA members. Her jaw tightened as she read the descriptions. Suspicious vehicle parked in driveway. Loud voices, possible domestic disturbance, turns out, a family barbecue. Unknown youth wandering sidewalks. Each one either dismissed by responding officers or closed as unfounded. A pattern was emerging. Sheridan recognized it for what it was, weaponized paranoia. Chief patted over, pressing his nose against her arm. She scratched his ear absently, her mind already leaping ahead. Clifford wasn't just a nuisance, he was abusing the system. And if he thought she wouldn't use her position to shine a light on it, he was sorely mistaken. Later that afternoon, Sheridan deliberately took a slow walk around the block. She wore plain clothes, jeans, a county polo shirt, and sunglasses. Her badge was tucked away, invisible. She wanted to see reactions, unfiltered. The results didn't surprise her. Curtains twitched as she passed. Patricia's minivan backed out of her driveway a little too quickly, nearly clipping the curb. 2 houses down, a man watering his lawn gave a stiff nod but avoided eye contact. Finally, Clifford himself emerged from his front porch, clipboard in hand like a general surveying his troops. His smile was forced, brittle. Well, he said, adjusting his glasses. Out for a stroll? Something like that, Sheridan replied. She didn't stop walking, but her eyes tracked his every move. You know, Clifford continued, falling into step beside her, last night was unfortunate. Misunderstandings happen. I'm sure the officers didn't mean any harm. Sheridan's laugh was dry. Is that what you call filing a false report? A misunderstanding? Clifford bristled. Now, hold on. I was acting in the interest of the community. We value safety here. She stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her sunglasses came off, revealing eyes sharp enough to cut glass. No, Clifford. You value control. There's a difference. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sheridan stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You called the cops on your sheriff. On your own neighbor. That's not just ignorance, it's reckless. And it's going on record. Clifford's composure cracked for just a moment. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. But then he puffed out his chest, clinging to his roll. You may have some badge downtown, but here? I set the rules. Sheridan's smile was cool, calculated. We'll see about that. That evening, she drafted an official memo, crisp and professional, effective immediately. The sheriff's office is reviewing all HOA-generated emergency calls for the last 12 months to determine misuse of county resources. She sent it to her department first. Then, she copied the county council. And finally, because she wanted Clifford to squirm, she printed a copy and slid it directly into his HOA mailbox. By morning, the entire neighborhood would know. As she sealed the envelope, Chief nudged her leg again. Sheridan knelt, scratching behind his ears. We're not just fighting nosy neighbors, buddy. We're fighting a system that lets people like Clifford think they're untouchable. Chief wagged his tail, oblivious but loyal. Sheridan stood, pocketing her badge and holstering the calm steel of her resolve. For too long, Clifford had mistaken silence for submission. Now, the tables were turning. She whispered to herself, words heavy with promise, you wanted a sheriff on this block, Clifford? Now you've got one. By dawn, the memo had spread like wildfire. Sheridan spotted the ripple effect during her morning jog with Chief. Neighbors weren't just sneaking glances anymore, they were whispering in clusters, pointing at the printed memo Clifford had taped angrily to the HOA notice board. The bold header screamed, County Sheriff to review all HOA-related police calls. The neighborhood that usually buzzed with sprinklers and lawnmowers now hummed with gossip. Sheridan kept her pace steady, but inside, she cataloged every nervous look and hushed conversation. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone knew it. Later that day, Sheridan pulled into her office at the county sheriff's department, greeted by a stack of case files already waiting on her desk. Her deputy, Morales, leaned against the doorframe with raised eyebrows. Boss, he said, I've got officers calling me asking if this is real. You're actually putting Maplewood under review? Sheridan slid her sunglasses onto the desk and flipped open a folder. Damn right I am. 15 bogus calls in 6 months. That's not neighborhood watch, it's harassment. Morales let out a low whistle. Clifford's not gonna like this. Sheridan smirked. Clifford's opinion stopped matching the moment he dialed 911 on me. She scanned the reports again, circling names. The same pattern emerged, Clifford as the complainant on nearly half the calls, Patricia on a handful, and 2 other board members filing occasional concerns. It was more than bias. It was a strategy. That evening, Sheridan attended the monthly HOA meeting. She didn't come in sweatpants this time. She arrived in full uniform, pressed shirt, badge gleaming, holstered sidearm resting on her hip. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered. Coffee cups froze mid-sip. She walked to the front without waiting for permission and stood at the edge of the folding table where Clifford and the board sat. Clifford's face turned the color of sour milk. Good evening, neighbors, Sheridan began, her tone steady, projecting like a courtroom prosecutor. As you're aware, there have been multiple emergency calls placed from this community in the past year. Calls that waste county resources, tie up law enforcement, and endanger the public by pulling officers away from real emergencies. Patricia squirmed in her seat. Clifford cleared his throat, ready to interrupt, but Sheridan lifted a hand. The gesture alone silenced him. I've reviewed the records personally, she continued. And I found a troubling pattern. The majority of these calls were made not out of genuine concern, but out of prejudice. Out of a desire to harass certain residents, myself included. A ripple of gasps traveled across the room. Sheridan let them settle before delivering the next blow. This isn't just poor judgment. This is criminal misuse of emergency services. And I will not allow it to continue. Clifford finally shot to his feet, voice booming. This is outrageous. You can't march in here and accuse us. You may be sheriff out there, but in here, I'm the authority." Sheridan's eyes locked on him, cold steel. "Then consider this your official notice. Your so-called authority ends where the law begins. And the law is mine to enforce." The room fell silent, save for the hum of the overhead lights. Sheridan let her words hang, then leaned forward slightly, her badge catching the fluorescent glare. "You wanted to treat me like I don't belong here? Fine. But now you'll answer to the sheriff every time you so much as dial a number. That's the power shift, Clifford. Get used to it." After the meeting adjourned, neighbors clustered in small groups. Some avoided her eyes, but a few, people who had been silent before, approached cautiously. One middle-aged woman pressed a shaky hand to her chest. "Sheriff Walker, I'm sorry for what they did. They don't speak for all of us." Another man muttered, "About time someone put Clifford in his place." Sheridan nodded politely, but she didn't bask in their sudden support. She knew how these things worked. Fear could turn to silence just as quickly as it turned to applause. But for the first time since moving here, she felt momentum on her side. As she walked back home under the street lamps, Chief trotting beside her, she allowed herself a thin smile. The game had changed. Clifford thought the HOA gave him power. Tonight, he learned that real power wore a badge. By dawn, the memo had spread like wildfire. Sheridan spotted the ripple effect during her morning jog with Chief. Neighbors weren't just sneaking glances anymore, they were whispering in clusters, pointing at the printed memo Clifford had taped angrily to the HOA notice board. The bold header screamed, "County Sheriff to review all HOA-related police calls." The neighborhood that usually buzzed with sprinklers and lawnmowers now hummed with gossip. Sheridan kept her pace steady, but inside, she cataloged every nervous look and hushed conversation. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone knew it. Later that day, Sheridan pulled into her office at the county sheriff's department, greeted by a stack of case files already waiting on her desk. Her deputy, Morales, leaned against the doorframe with raised eyebrows. "Boss," he said, "I've got officers calling me asking if this is real. You're actually putting Maplewood under review?" Sheridan slid her sunglasses onto the desk and flipped open a folder. "Damn right I am. 15 bogus calls in 6 months. That's not neighborhood watch, it's harassment." Morales let out a low whistle. "Clifford's not gonna like this." Sheridan smirked. "Clifford's opinion stopped matching the moment he dialed 911 on me." She scanned the reports again, circling names. The same pattern emerged, Clifford as the complainant on nearly half the calls, Patricia on a handful, and 2 other board members filing occasional concerns. It was more than bias. It was a strategy. That evening, Sheridan attended the monthly HOA meeting. She didn't come in sweatpants this time. She arrived in full uniform, pressed shirt, badge gleaming, holstered sidearm resting on her hip. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered. Coffee cups froze mid-sip. She walked to the front without waiting for permission and stood at the edge of the folding table where Clifford and the board sat. Clifford's face turned the color of sour milk. "Good evening, neighbors," Sheridan began, her tone steady, projecting like a courtroom prosecutor. "As you're aware, there have been multiple emergency calls placed from this community in the past year. Calls that waste county resources, tie up law enforcement, and endanger the public by pulling officers away from real emergencies." Patricia squirmed in her seat. Clifford cleared his throat, ready to interrupt, but Sheridan lifted a hand. The gesture alone silenced him. "I've reviewed the records personally," she continued. "And I found a troubling pattern. The majority of these calls were made not out of genuine concern, but out of prejudice. Out of a desire to harass certain residents, myself included." A ripple of gasps traveled across the room. Sheridan let them settle before delivering the next blow. "This isn't just poor judgment. This is criminal misuse of emergency services. And I will not allow it to continue." Clifford finally shot to his feet, voice booming. "This is outrageous. You can't march in here and accuse us. You may be sheriff out there, but in here, I'm the authority." Sheridan's eyes locked on him, cold steel. "Then consider this your official notice. Your so-called authority ends where the law begins. And the law is mine to enforce." The room fell silent, save for the hum of the overhead lights. Sheridan let her words hang, then leaned forward slightly, her badge catching the fluorescent glare. "You wanted to treat me like I don't belong here? Fine. But now you'll answer to the sheriff every time you so much as dial a number. That's the power shift, Clifford. Get used to it." After the meeting adjourned, neighbors clustered in small groups. Some avoided her eyes, but a few, people who had been silent before, approached cautiously. One middle-aged woman pressed a shaky hand to her chest. "Sheriff Walker, I'm sorry for what they did. They don't speak for all of us." Another man muttered, "About time someone put Clifford in his place." Sheridan nodded politely, but she didn't bask in their sudden support. She knew how these things worked. Fear could turn to silence just as quickly as it turned to applause. But for the first time since moving here, she felt momentum on her side. As she walked back home under the street lamps, Chief trotting beside her, she allowed herself a thin smile. The game had changed. Clifford thought the HOA gave him power. Tonight, he learned that real power wore a badge. The night after the explosive HOA meeting, Maplewood Estates felt different. The same lawns were trimmed, the same sprinklers ticked, but the atmosphere had shifted. Neighbors avoided Clifford's eye, conversations hushed when he passed. His authority, once unchallenged, now carried the stench of desperation. Sheridan noticed it immediately during her evening walk with Chief. Usually Clifford strutted around like a king, clipboard under his arm, ready to quote bylaws like scripture. Tonight, his porch light was off, his curtains drawn. The self-appointed general was in retreat. Sheridan smirked. "Took long enough," she muttered, patting Chief's head. Inside Clifford's home, however, storm clouds gathered. Patricia sat at the dining table, wringing her hands, while Clifford paced like a caged tiger. "This is getting out of hand," Patricia whispered. "You saw the looks. They're turning on us." Clifford slammed his fist onto the table, making the salt shaker jump. "Let them turn. I built this neighborhood's order. Without me, it falls apart. That woman is manipulating them." "She's the sheriff," Patricia shot back, surprising even herself with the sharpness in her tone. "People are scared of her because she actually has power. Legal power. Not bylaws on paper." Clifford froze, blinking at her as if she committed treason. While Clifford fought to hold his shrinking empire, Sheridan was quietly gathering ammunition. Back at her office, Deputy Morales dropped a manila folder onto her desk. "Got something you'll want to see," he said. Sheridan flipped it open. Inside were copies of HOA financial records, meeting minutes, invoices, suspicious withdrawals. The kind of documents that didn't belong in county files. "Where'd this come from?" she asked. Morales shrugged. "Anonymous drop. Someone on the inside wants Clifford gone as much as you do." Sheridan scanned the numbers, her eyes narrowing. Thousands of dollars marked for community improvements had vanished into vague accounts. Landscaping projects billed 3 times the going rate. Renovation funds approved without any resident votes. "This isn't just harassment," she muttered. "This is fraud." Morales crossed his arms. "Want me to dig deeper?" Sheridan closed the folder with a snap. "No. I'll handle this one personally." 2 nights later, as the board held an emergency session in Clifford's garage, one of his own turned against him. "I can't keep doing this," muttered Ron, a soft-spoken treasurer with a perpetual sweat stain on his collar. He shoved a stack of papers across the folding table. "I didn't sign up to cover your tracks. She's digging, Clifford. And when she finds out where the money went, we all go down with you." Clifford sneered. "You think she'll believe you? You think she cares? She's just using this to play hero." Ron shook his head. No. She's using it to enforce the law. Which is more than I can say for you. With that, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, leaving Clifford and Patricia staring at the papers, exposed, vulnerable. The next morning, Sheridan found an envelope slipped under her front door. Inside, photocopies of the same financial records Morales had received, but this time with handwritten notes in the margins. Names, dates, arrows connecting Clifford's signature to shell accounts. Sheridan let out a slow whistle. Whoever her mystery ally was, they wanted Clifford's empire burned to the ground. She tucked the papers into a binder, already picturing the look on Clifford's face when she revealed them. This wasn't just about shutting down petty harassment anymore. It was about showing the entire neighborhood that power built on intimidation and corruption could crumble in an instant. Chief barked once, as if sensing her determination. Sheridan knelt, ruffling his fur. Almost there, boy. One more push, and we bring the whole house down. Meanwhile, across the street, Clifford sat in the dark, blinds half closed. His phone buzzed with unanswered texts from board members questioning his leadership. Patricia sat silently beside him, arms crossed. They'll come around, Clifford insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Once they realize she's bluffing, they'll remember who keeps this place in order. Patricia didn't respond. For the first time, she wasn't sure she believed him. And that silence, the absence of her usual support, was what rattled Clifford more than Sheridan's badge ever could. The emergency HOA meeting was supposed to be Clifford's comeback. He'd sent out emails dripping with authority, plastered flyers on mailboxes, and even called a few loyalists to guarantee a crowd. We'll remind them who runs Maplewood Estates, he told himself. But when the folding chairs filled inside the community clubhouse, the mood wasn't reverent, it was restless. Neighbors whispered in low tones, their eyes darting between Clifford at the podium and the door everyone knew she'd walk through. Sheridan. Clifford cleared his throat, clipboard in hand like a preacher clutching a Bible. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is about restoring order, he began. There has been misinformation spread by outsiders who want to undermine this neighborhood's values. A few muttered groans broke through. Someone whispered loudly, outsider? She lives here. Before Clifford could respond, the double doors swung open. Sheridan entered, not in jeans and a t-shirt this time, but in her full sheriff's uniform. Badge gleaming, sidearm holstered, her boots clicking against the floor like a gavel. Deputy Morales flanked her, carrying a binder thick with papers. The room went silent. Evening, neighbors, Sheridan said calmly, surveying the room. I hear we're discussing order tonight. Clifford's face reddened. This is a private HOA matter. You have no standing. Sheridan cut him off with a single raised hand. I have all the standing I need. I'm not here as your neighbor tonight. I'm here as your sheriff. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward, eyes bright with anticipation. Sheridan walked to the front, set her binder on the table, and opened it. These, she said, flipping pages one by one, are your HOA's financial records. Records that show embezzlement, inflated contracts, and unauthorized withdrawals. Thousands of dollars meant for this community, funneled into personal accounts. She turned a page, tapping Clifford's signature with her finger. All signed off by your president. The room erupted, neighbors shouting over each other. Is this true? I paid for that playground upgrade, where's the money? My dues went into his pocket. Clifford pounded the podium. Lies! Forged documents. She's framing me because I dared hold her accountable. Sheridan didn't flinch. Funny. Because these came from inside your own board. Looks like not everyone's willing to sink with your ship. She glanced toward Ron, the treasurer, who shifted in his seat but gave a small nod. The crowd murmured again, realization spreading like wildfire. Patricia tried to intervene, her voice trembling. Clifford has always worked hard for this neighborhood. By harassing residents? Sheridan shot back. By calling the police on homeowners who don't look like you. By weaponizing bylaws to intimidate instead of serve? The silence was sharp now, heavy with truth no one wanted to admit but couldn't deny. Sheridan let the silence linger before she delivered the final blow. You called officers on me. In my own yard. You tried to paint me as an outsider. But I am this county's law. And tonight, that law is standing right here, staring you in the face. She gave Morales a nod. He stepped forward, handing her a warrant. Sheridan held it high enough for all to see. This is a lawful order for the arrest of Clifford Hayes on charges of fraud, misappropriation of funds, and harassment. The clubhouse erupted again, but this time with cheers and clapping. Some neighbors actually stood, applauding, their relief breaking like a dam. Clifford's face drained of color. You can't, you wouldn't. Sheridan stepped closer, her voice cold steel. You wanted authority, Clifford. You wanted control. Tonight, you get accountability. Deputy Morales moved in, securing Clifford's hands behind his back. The once proud president was led away, his clipboard clattering to the floor. Sheridan picked it up, examined it for a moment, then set it down on the table with a finality that felt like the closing of a chapter. She turned back to the crowd. This community deserves better. Leadership should protect, not exploit. From this day forward, the harassment stops. The intimidation stops. And you, she pointed at the neighbors, you take back your neighborhood. Applause thundered, filling the clubhouse until the walls seemed to shake. By the time Sheridan stepped outside, the night air felt lighter. The porch lights lining Maplewood Estates seemed brighter, warmer, as if the whole street had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Clifford was shoved into the back of a squad car, eyes burning with disbelief, while Patricia stood frozen on the curb, arms crossed, realizing the empire they'd built had collapsed in an instant. Sheridan straightened her hat, adjusted her badge, and glanced back at the crowd gathering in the doorway, watching her like a guardian they never expected but desperately needed. Meeting adjourned, she said, and walked calmly into the night. The sun rose bright and sharp over Maplewood Estates the next morning, as if the neighborhood itself had been scrubbed clean overnight. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy with tension. Sprinklers arced in quiet rhythm, children rode bikes down the cul-de-sac, and the only clipboard in sight was lying abandoned in the county evidence locker. Sheridan sat on her porch with a mug of coffee, Chief stretched lazily at her feet. She could hear the hum of conversation across the street, neighbors gathered in small clusters, talking not with fear, but with relief. The news had traveled fast. Clifford Hayes, once untouchable, had spent the night in county jail. His charges, fraud, harassment, misuse of community funds, were plastered across the local headlines. Patricia, stripped of her authority, had vanished behind drawn blinds. And the HOA, once a symbol of control, now stood leaderless, its bylaws a stack of powerless paper. Sheridan took a long sip of coffee, savoring the quiet. For the first time, her home felt like hers. By late morning, a knock rattled her front door. Deputy Morales stood there, hat in hand, his usual smirk replaced with something more respectful. "Thought you'd want an update," he said. Sheridan waved him in. "Let's hear it." Morales leaned against the counter as she poured him coffee. "Clifford's arraignment is set for next week. The DA's office says it's an airtight case. Ron, the treasurer, already flipped, he's cooperating fully. Between the financials and witness testimony, Clifford's not walking out of this one." Sheridan nodded. "Good. The neighborhood deserves closure." Morales chuckled. "Closure? They're ready to throw him a goodbye parade. You should have seen the crowd outside last night. Half of them were recording, cheering. Some folks said it felt like the first time they weren't afraid to step outside after dark." Sheridan allowed herself a small smile. "That's the kind of order worth protecting." Around noon, a group of neighbors knocked, families, seniors, even teenagers who'd only ever seen Clifford as the voice of authority. They stood awkwardly on Sheridan's porch until one of them, Mrs. Alvarez, spoke up. "We wanted to thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "For standing up to him. For standing up for all of us." A chorus of agreement followed. Some clapped, some simply nodded, but the gratitude was real, raw, and overwhelming. Sheridan set down her mug and met their eyes. "You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourselves courage. Clifford thrived because people let him. That ends now." Her words settled over them like a promise. That evening, the neighborhood gathered at the park, the same park Clifford once claimed was for residents only while driving out families who didn't fit his vision. But tonight, the park was alive. Kids played tag, parents shared food, neighbors who hadn't spoken in years laughed together under string lights. It felt less like a meeting and more like a block party. Sheridan arrived quietly, not in uniform this time, but in jeans and a jacket. Still, heads turned. Applause broke out as she stepped onto the grass, and for once, she didn't deflect it. She let them clap, let them celebrate not her badge, but what it meant, that no one, not even an HOA president, was above the law. Later, as the crowd thinned and dusk painted the sky in shades of gold and violet, Sheridan stood at the park's edge. Chief sat beside her, tail thumping against the grass. Morales joined her, hands in his pockets. "Hell of a week, huh?" "You could say that," Sheridan replied. She looked at the children still laughing on the swings. "Feels like the neighborhood's finally breathing again." Morales nodded. "That's your doing." Sheridan shook her head gently. "No. That's Justice's doing. My badge just gave it a voice." Back at her porch, Sheridan ended the night where it had begun, coffee in hand, Chief curled at her side. She leaned back, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Clifford's house sat dark, silent, no longer the watchtower of a self-proclaimed ruler. For the first time in a long time, Maplewood Estates felt like home. Not because it was perfect, but because the people had reclaimed it. Sheridan touched the edge of her badge, catching the faint glint of moonlight. She didn't need to wear it tonight to know what it stood for. Order. Justice. Belonging. With a slow, satisfied smile, she whispered into the quiet, "No one's above the law." And with that, the sheriff closed her eyes, at peace at last in the neighborhood she'd fought to protect. As Clifford was hauled away in handcuffs, the sheriff sipped her coffee on the porch, her badge catching the evening light. She didn't just reclaim her home, she reminded the whole neighborhood that no one is above the law.